size, same shape. Okay? But how do you prove congruence? Because your next test is all about proofs. How do you prove congruence? So today, if you're going to prove congruence, you have to prove all angles are congruent and prove all sides are congruent. So today, when we prove congruence, you have to prove all the angles are congruent and all the sides are congruent so that you can write a congruency statement. Yes, ma'am?
So on the test, you just all
Yes. So this is the last step of every proof on your test. The last step. So here's what it will look like. Something like this.
Do you want to draw some?
You can if you want to. I'll give you guys an easy example. There will be two triangles there. And this is a very simple example. If they are marked as congruent, y'all know what congruent marks look like? So arcs mark angles. So you would see something like this. Angle A is congruent to angle X because they are marked as congruent. And then we'll use two arcs like angle Y and angle B are congruent. And we'll use another mark like this angle is congruent to this angle. So if you make a little checklist, you have 1, 2, 3 pairs of congruent angles. And they have to prove all the sides are congruent. So we can say this side is congruent to this side. This side is congruent to this side. And this side is congruent to this side. So the rest of the unit is you guys getting the ability to do this. But at the end of your proof, you should have something like this done. And then you're going to write a congruency statement. Triangle this is congruent to triangle this. You have to write the congruency statement. Generally, you guys do pretty well with this. So you have to name a triangle over here.
ABC.
So we're going to choose A, B, C. There is no wrong way to do that. Well, there is. Now, here's the part where most of you guys make small mistakes. Because we went triangle A, B, C, we must list the next triangle in the exact same order so that corresponding parts match up. So if I chose angle A first, the angle that corresponds to it is angle X. I chose B second, so its corresponding angle X, Y, and Z. So two things are going to happen today. You will get an already marked figure, and it will be your goal to write the congruency statement, or I will give you the congruency statement, and it'll be your job to mark the figure. It's all about the congruency statement today. So this next scenario, you probably don't have to write this down. It's techniques to identify corresponding parts of congruent triangles, which is a very loaded statement. So in this scenario right here, they already give us a congruency statement. They say that shape ABCD is congruent to shape QRST. Now we have to identify all their corresponding parts. And that word should be familiar from transversals, right? Corresponding. Everyone's favorite angle pair. But what does corresponding mean today? Can I borrow you for a second?
Sure.
Up here. You be my corresponding person. I didn't choose Caroline, I choose girl. Okay? So me and Kate are corresponding figures. We're both beautiful. We're both about the same size. So it'll be our job today. You will see a corresponding figure over there, or you'll see a figure over there, you will see a figure over here, and it will tell you we are corresponding. So if I identify this part of my figure, it is your job to identify what is corresponding on him. What do you think corresponds to this?
His left. Like that one.
You think it's his left arm?
No, it's
His right arm. So look, we're corresponding, right? And it's almost done. Like he's just mirroring me. Go ahead. Now, if I do this, what corresponds over here?
Oh.
Yeah, right? It's almost like, but what gets weird is when I do this. Now you can't move. Now I'm transforming myself. And I say, what corresponds to me now? You see how it's not the same location. It's his left side and it's my right side, but when I untransform myself, it becomes the same piece. So sometimes, thank you very much thank you for not sticking the leg up. Alright, sometimes we'll see shapes listed like this. Alright, you got the back of this hand and the front of this hand, so what corresponds to this piece over here? This piece over here. So you have to kind of untransform it. I don't even know how to do that. Is that possible? To make them match. So when I draw shapes in a different order, it's hard to see, and you'll see that here in a second. So we use these things called the circle technique to identify these. So the circle technique says if you stack your statements, that A and Q correspond to each other. Cool, right? And then B and R correspond to each other, and C and S correspond to each other, and D and T correspond to each other. They are corresponding and they are congruent. Angles are easy, right? And I could draw the figure and I could mark it, but as a pre-AP student, you should be able to pull it from the statement. Now, what's a little more complicated is when I ask you to identify corresponding sides from a congruency statement. So in this scenario, it says those two sides are corresponding and they are congruent. What's another side that is corresponding and congruent? Using the circle technique. So you would circle this set of letters. Does that kind of make sense? And then what's the other side? Like these two pieces right here. And then what? That's the hard one. It has 4 vertices, so it should have 4 sides. There is also this side right here. The first letter and the last letter. So, if you wrote that down on your paper, do you think you would receive full credit? No. So, for your test, make sure it's written correctly. So, which ones were written correctly? The first 2 or the last 2? So, this says the measurement of AB is congruent to the measurement of QR. You have to make sure that it says line segment AB, that is the side of the figure. Line segment AB. So that's a good way to have a correct answer there and still lose a point because you wrote it incorrectly. So now it's not just 49 blanks for 2 points apiece, it's 49 correctly notated points for 2 points apiece. So you can get the answer right, and you can still get a 51 on this test with all the correct answers because you didn't write it correctly. Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. It's Friday, guys. Today's supposed to be a fun day. So, let's look at it this way. I just want you guys to write a congruency statement. I'm I'm telling you right now that these two shapes are congruent. There is no doubting that. It says it in the statement. I want you to write a congruency statement. This shape is congruent to this shape. This one broke me earlier. How do you do step one? What's the first step in writing a congruency statement? Name the first figure. Perfect. A, B, C, D. Pretty basic, but correct. You could name that B, C, D, A. The only thing that you cannot name that figure is like B, D, A, C. You can't run around inside the box. You have to go B, C, A, B, or A, B, C, B, or A, B, C, B. You have to go around in a circle. So now the hard part we're still struggling with is what is the letter that what is the angle that corresponds to A?
I think
F?
I think it's
F? So we did this, A, B, C, D. We're starting here, and we have to determine which direction to go, clockwise or counterclockwise. So you think it's G?
G's.
You think it's G? So once we go that way, we are stuck. We have to keep continuing. So let's see if it works. You said that A and F correspond to each other, right? And then B and G correspond to. You all see it? I can see it perfectly. Can't see it? That's a reflection. So you have to reflect it to make it work. That's the other side of it. It's fun, right? Now that's hard because there's 4 sides. But we can make it even more complicated like this.
Do you want to start this one out?
You just watch this. So, help me out. What is the congruency statement? A, B, C, D. So basic. That's no fun. That's alright. A, B, C, D. We went like this all the way around. You think it's P, Q, R, S, T?
No, sorry.
You think P and A match? You were right. P, Q, R, S, T. That's hard to see, isn't it? Anybody see a pattern yet?
There's a word right
The alphabet pattern? It's always alphabetical. Never, ever fall for that trap. Ever.
What trap?
The A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z trap. It's never always just going to be in alphabetical order. Right? It is right now to help you guys clarify that, but it will never happen like that in real life. So what about this question? What are they asking you to do here?
Congruent figures.
Huh?
Congruent.
Don't you have to like label it?
Just do you see that it already gives you a congruency statement? there is a congruency statement there already. It's just asking you to identify the corresponding parts of the congruent figures. So this is our practice for the marking technique. Can you guys do it written like that, or do you want to see them stacked?
Let's just try them right
You want to try it like that? So it says angle M corresponds to angle Q. So we would do 1 mark for M and 1 mark for Q. Angle N corresponds to angle R. Angle O corresponds to and angle P corresponds to angle T. Hard to draw. I think this is fun, right? This is the fun part of geometry, just drawing some stuff on there. So now we have to go through and mark our sides. If side MN corresponds to, so MN gets 1 mark, QR gets 1 mark. That's the first 2 letters of each statement. Then
OP is congruent to
now. OPS.
NO and RS. So just keep going around. NO and RS. Now you can skip around if you want to, it doesn't really matter. Then OP and ST. And then finally the last unmarked side, QT and MP. That's the first letter and the last letter. So using your statement to mark a figure as congruent. How do you feel right now? Not bad? Okay. So an application question. Remember back in the day when I told you guys you had to have at least 2 angles in a figure or in a triangle to solve for the third angle? Well, now you have the ability to solve for all the measures of triangle ABC if there's only 1 angle in there. So, angle A is 30 degrees, but according to this statement right here, if angle A is 30 degrees, then angle D is also 30 degrees because they are corresponding parts of congruent figures. See how the application works? Now we're able to copy that over. And it says angle E is 65 degrees. So now I need you guys to earn this, please. I don't need a number here. What can you deduce about the third angle for each of those triangles?
It's congruent. C is congruent to N.
They are the same. Okay, that is called the third angle theorem. So do you have to do any math to prove that angle C and angle F are congruent? They will always be congruent if 2 angles from this figure are congruent to 2 angles from this figure. No matter what happens, these 2 angles will wind up being the same measurement. That's called the third angle theorem. Right? So on the next slide, I just kind of wrote down what the third angle theorem says. And you can write it if you want to. It says if 2 angles of one triangle are congruent to 2 angles of another triangle, then their third angles are congruent. So, do you have enough information to prove that angle C and angle F are congruent? Yes. So you could write angle C is congruent to angle F. Now if I ask you to justify your answer, why are angle C and angle F congruent?
Third angle
The
to
third angle theorem. You see how this might be on your proofs test? You see that? So I'm adding more tools to your toolbox. Remember, like we did definition of a midpoint, definition of perpendicular lines, definition of an angle bisector, all that fun stuff. I'm going to ask you a really important question. Is there enough information there to write a congruency statement? Yes, there is.
They don't have the sides.
So right now I have 3 pairs of congruent angles, right? Do I have anything listed about the side lengths? So can I write a congruency statement? No, I cannot. Because you have to have all 6 pieces. 3 pairs of congruent sides and 3 pairs of congruent angles. If you don't have all 6 pieces, you cannot write a congruency statement. And here's why. Is that triangle possible? It's an equilateral triangle, 60, 60, and 60, right? Is this triangle possible? Are those 2 triangles congruent?
Yes.
They are both triangles, but are they the exact same size? No, they're not. They have the same angle measurements, but they do not have the same side measurements. So unless they tell me the sides are the same, you cannot just assume it. So this is what your test will kind of look like. It says, given this information, with right here with what you have, do you have enough information to prove that those 2 triangles are congruent? So we talked about it. You have to have 3 congruent angles, and you have to have 3 congruent sides. So we start looking at it. It says that angle G and angle I are congruent. Is everybody cool with that? Check. One angle has been confirmed congruent. It also says that this is 90 degrees and this is 90 degrees. So do we have 2 pairs of congruent angles? Check, we're good. But what about angle H over here? Are they congruent? Yes. Why? So now I have the ability to mark it because there is a reason justifying that. The third angle theorem. If I have 2 angles of this triangle that are congruent to 2 angles of this triangle, you can deduce that the third angles are the same. Yes, 3 angles. Now we move on to sides. It says that this side is congruent to this side. Check. It says that this side is congruent to this side. Check. But is there some way to prove that the third sides are congruent? This is the lingering guy. That's the last piece that we need. Is there a way to justify that? So let me write it down. Is this true? But why?
Because you're the same.
That's not a geometric reason. That's called the reflexive property. Because I am congruent to myself. Think about it. Is line JH the same size as line JH? Duh. They're the same line. But why are they congruent? The reflexive property. Check. And do I have enough information to prove they're congruent? Guys, that reflexive property is going to slap you in the face this entire unit. So now that you've seen it, am I the same thing as myself? Yes, it's the reflexive property. So now I have the ability to say these 2 shapes are congruent. Yay, math! And so, surprise, the first 9 weeks was just all practice to do more math. It's not going away. So let's jump over here. Is this 95-degree angle the same as this 95-degree angle? Yeah, there's one angle. Well, what else can I say?
They're vertical.
Ooh, vertical angles proves that these are the same. I can't just mark it unless I have a reason to do it. And then the third angle theorem says that these two angles are the same.
But they don't have the,
Three angles, check, now what?
they don't have the sides measured,
We don't have any side lengths measured,
so it's not.
so we can't say that they're congruent or not. Pretty cool, huh? This ruin your Friday? What? You good? You good, Jeff? Got your stuff? Alright, so now we're adding information they tell us to add. Y'all can just watch this because you're going to get it. And our end game is to write a congruency statement. So this is what we call developing a proof. It would say given angle A and angle C are right angles. Is everybody good with that? Given AB is congruent to CD. Everybody good with that? And AD is congruent to CB. Everybody still good? This one's a little tough. Number 11. ADB, that's this angle right here, is congruent to CBD. Is there enough information given to prove that those two triangles are congruent?
Yes.
Not directly given, but can you deduce the remainder of the information that you need?
Yes.
So you have to be able to somehow prove, is this angle the same as this angle?
Those alternate.
Is this angle the same as this angle?
Third.
Yes,
Third
the
angle.
third angle theorem. Cool. We have 1, 2 pairs of congruent sides. Can we deduce something about this side right here? The reflexive property says that this side is the same as itself. Do I have 3 congruent sides and 3 congruent angles?
Yes.
Now, achievement unlocked. We get to write a congruency statement.
ABD.
You said ABD. Thank you for correcting that. Now, what he did was this. The right angle, the 2 marked angle, the 1 marked angle. So we must follow the same pattern.
C.
CDB. Cool, right? So this is the last step of every one of your proofs.
They said they're all congruent. Can go.
They are, but you have to prove why they are. That's the hard part. Are these congruent? Is triangle TRK and triangle TUK congruent? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, because then you can assume that the third angles are congruent.
So the assumption that the third angles are congruent is correct, because that's the third angle theorem. So now we have 3 congruent angles. And the reflexive side. Do I have everything marked? Yes. What about this guy?
Oh wait. Yes.
No. Look. 7 and 7, those are congruent.
But the other ones
So they're not. They're just 2 different random triangles. Now, here's my question. Do you know what the third angle theorem says?
are. But if
But can you prove it? We need to prove it. No? You good with that? So the proof looks like this. We're trying to prove that C and F are congruent, and you guys know the reason C and F are congruent is the third angle theorem. So what they're trying to get you guys to do is say that A plus B plus C equals 180, and B plus E plus F equals 180, Then they're gonna ask you to substitute some stuff out and say, I'm gonna take A out and put D in. I'm gonna take E out and put, take B out and put E in. Alright, so I'm substituting these things because they are marked as congruent. And the reflexive property would say that D plus, or this transitive property, and R, F, and C the same. So using your math to justify that they will always be the same. So it's a large monster, guys. We're not going to do this today. I took too much time. But here's where it's going.
Oh, they're supposed to be like your markings.
That's
now.
parallel. That's parallel. So can you prove that this triangle is congruent to this triangle? So these are alternate interior angles. Uh-oh. And these are alternate interior angles. And this side is the same as itself. So I'm going to start to introduce you guys shortcuts. Now you can do, not all 6 parts are the same, you can pick 3. So there are 6 different shortcuts.